Today, we're going to be taking a look at what the scorecard is, how it works, and why it's so beneficial. And towards the end, we'll also be able to see what reports we can use that goes along with it. My name is Brooke. I am an Advisor Service Associate here at RPAG. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at support@rpag.com. So with that, let's get started. Let's talk about what the scorecard does. Our scorecard system was created to score funds based on multiple criteria that is commonly used by institutional investors and money managers. The scorecard is a clear 10-point numerical scoring system that can be used to monitor funds and identify skillful managers. The scorecard has three main objectives. One is to identify those skillful and successful managers. We do this by taking a look at their track record and how they can generate outperformance, not only against their benchmarks, but also in absolute and risk-adjusted sense as well. We're also looking to enhance the investment due diligence process by creating an easy way to identify fund health that uses complex metrics as well. Lastly, we want to minimize exposure to fiduciary liability, and we do this by creating a repeatable and documentable process through the scorecard and through your investment reviews. Some benefits of the scorecard are that it's clear and comprehensive. We're looking at a 10-point score from 0 to 10, with 10 being the best. This is an easy to understand and digestible format for your plan sponsors during your review meetings. When you look at the full breakdown of the scorecard as well, it's very clear to see what areas the fund might be struggling with because they'll be marked with a pass-fail 0 or 1. The scorecard also offers great integration into your IPS or investment policy statement. One way to do this is by breaking these down into our acceptable watch list and review ranges. When a fund scores between a 7 and a 10, then we can say it's good to maintain, it's acceptable, or if we're looking to add a new fund, we'll try to find a fund that's scoring within that range. The watch list and review funds are able to indicate that additional due diligence may be required in order to keep this fund in the lineup. Watch list and review funds are flagged in the system with yellow and red flags respectively. You'll be able to find these flags in the fund lookup tool and your fund lineup, and you can add them in your investment review by changing that consideration step to watch list or review. One thing to note is that it's relatively easy for a fund to get onto the watch list. It just needs to miss those 4 points once to get a 6, but it's a bit harder to get off the watch list. Once a fund is watch listed or marked for review, it will need 4 consecutive quarters of a 7 or higher to move off the watch list. This is why you might see a higher scoring fund still flagged in the system. So if you ever see a fund that's scoring an 8 and it's got a red flag next to it, a good report to look at would be its score history. And you can see where it's been to earn that watch list or that review flag and how close it is to moving on past that. So how does it work? RPAG breaks down our scores into 3 buckets or categories. These are active, passive, and asset allocation funds. We utilize these buckets to give a better apples-to-apples comparison through the use of custom peer groups. By sorting funds into active versus passive versus asset allocation, we can have a clearer view of how they stack up against their peers. Our scorecard analytics are all pass-fail, so you'll only see 1s or 0s. It either earns the point or it doesn't. And again, it's on a scale from 0 to 10. The scorecard is made up of 10 different factors. The first 8 or 80% are quantitative. So these are looking at factors like risk and return, style, and these are built up on modern portfolio statistics, quadratic optimization analysis, and our peer group rankings. The next 20%, or the remaining 20%, is qualitative, and this allows us to account for things like manager tenure, the expense ratio of the fund, especially for active and passive funds, and the fund's statistical significance. And the statistical significance, I think, might get a bit overlooked, but this helps us be assured that the fund's performance is relative and is based in like a sound setting. So first we'll take a look at our active funds. A few things to note about our active funds is that these require 5 years of monthly returns in order to score. If you ever see in the scorecard or in the portal the acronym HIS or HIS, it's an indication that that fund does not have enough history to score. So it could be that it's just too new, and that's why it has that designation. In that case, while a scorecard might not be appropriate because there won't be any metrics, you could still pull things like returns analysis, and that will give you some data to still make decisions or do some due diligence, even if you don't have the complete scorecard. The scorecard identifies ideal managers by looking at 4 main categories for active funds. The first is style purity. We want to be sure that the active manager is staying true to that fund's style and investment style and market cap. So if we're going to choose a large cap value to add to our lineup, we want to make sure that this manager over time is in fact a large cap manager or large cap value manager. We're also looking for outperformance, and this is really important, especially when it comes to that active manager fee. We want to get what we pay for, and we're looking for outperformance not only in the absolute, but also risk adjusted against its benchmark and against its peers. Speaking of peers, we're looking for a strong peer group ranking. And this ties into that bit about custom peer groups. We're looking for how this fund ranks against other active funds and not the whole gamut. We're also looking for a long track record. Long track records and long manager tenure helps us be assured that this performance and this outperformance especially is due to manager skill, because we're looking at the performance over a complete market cycle and not just in the short run. For active funds, we utilize industry standard benchmarks. This is going to include the Russell for our US equities, MSCI for international equities, Bloomberg, Barclays for our fixed income, and others. If you'd like to see more benchmarks, one great report to run is an asset class review. And again, this is one we'll cover towards the end on how to pull this. But in the asset class review, you'll be able to see secondary and tertiary benchmarks and compare your fund to those as well. And then lastly, as I've been saying, in our active funds, our peer groups omit passive funds. So we're only looking at how this fund stacks up against other active funds. This is what the active scorecard looks like. If you've never seen the scorecard before, I recommend taking a moment to take it all in and read each part. It can be a bit dense and a bit overwhelming. We do have resources in the Resource Center that has a scorecard cheat sheet. In fact, the easiest way to find this is to type in scorecard in that little search bar under your name in the top right corner and hit enter, and that will pull up dozens of results, and the one that is labeled scorecard cheat sheet is a great one to have on hand, especially when presenting to your clients. For today, let's take a look at the weightings column. We'll see that the first 80% are our quantitative factors, the first 30 being made up of style. Our style factors, again, we want to see that the manager stays true to that style purity. So this lets us take a look at our returns-based style analysis. We're trying to see if our manager is staying true to the style and not drifting away from it. The next 30% is looking at risk and return factors. This is related to our outperformance goal for ideal active managers. We're looking for risk-adjusted performance. We're looking for absolute performance as well. We're looking to see if the manager is adding value on an absolute and risk-adjusted basis. The next 20% of our quantitative section is based on our peer group rankings. So again, we're looking to see our returns and information ratio rankings, how this fund is stacking up against other active funds. And lastly, our last 20% or our last 2 points are looking at qualitative factors. So again, this is going to be manager tenure, expenses, strength of statistics. For manager tenure for active funds, we're looking for more than 3.5 years of manager tenure in order to maintain those 2 points, or to not lose points for that section. For expense, we're looking to see that it doesn't go far above the average expense for active funds in that asset class. And we're also looking for a strong strength of statistics to know that these data points we're using are representative of the fund. The next strategy we'll look at are asset allocation funds. This scorecard is pretty similar to the active scorecard, but we'll point out some key differences here. First, let's note that in the asset allocation, what does this cover? This covers target date funds, risk-based funds, balanced funds, and multi-sector bonds. In asset allocation strategies, an ideal manager also provides outperformance similar to the active funds. We're looking for outperformance over a complete market cycle, outperformance on an absolute and risk-adjusted basis. Again, we're looking for a long track record. Asset allocation funds also require 5 years of history in order to score, so 5 years of monthly returns. And we're looking for a high peer group ranking. One important part about asset allocations is that we don't use industry standard benchmarks for asset allocation funds. And this is in part because there aren't really good industry standard benchmarks for asset allocation funds. And when I say this, I mean, if you were to look at a specific year vintage in one target date series and compare it to the same year vintage in a different target date series, there's not really a good apples to apples comparison of how those two funds are composed. And so in that case, we utilize custom benchmarks. And our returns-based style analysis allows us to create these benchmarks using the 4 main categories of US equities, international equities, US fixed income, and cash. So when you go to pull different reports, instead of like the Russell that you see kind of in a bar underneath it, you'll see custom benchmark or custom style benchmark. If you pull an asset class review, you'll be able to see the exact breakdown of what that custom benchmark is for that fund. Asset allocation funds also use different style analytics to better evaluate diversification in comparison to our active funds. And this is going to include our custom style benchmarks. This is what the asset allocation scorecard looks like. So again, that first 80% is going to be our quantitative factors, and the last 20 is our qualitative. The qualitative factors are the same, looking at those manager tenure, fund expense, and strength of statistics. The differences start to come in around style factors. We see the first one, we are now looking at risk level. So we're looking to see that the fund has the appropriate risk for the category that it's in. We're also looking for style diversity in comparison to the active funds. So we're looking to see if the manager has properly diversified their portfolio based on their strategy. And again, we're looking for those peer group rankings with those custom benchmarks and in our custom peer groups. We're also looking at a TDF scorecard. So the TDF scorecard can be a bit confusing because I did tell you that all the factors are 1 point each and it's out of 10. The way that TDFs are presented in our scorecard are through a blended score. And this is because we want to take into consideration not only how the vintages are scoring, but also those underlying funds and how that selection influences the vintages. So we create this blended score. Now it says 5 points for each, but what that really indicates is that it's a 50-50 weighting. So we're going to take the average of the asset allocation, where the vintages all score 10 points, take that average, and we'll take the selection score, so the 10 points or various points for the underlying funds, and average them together. That's how we get those 5 and 5, and that's how it's divided. And so we get a blended score, and you can see this when you pull scorecards. You might notice that there's some options for asset allocations. This is what it's talking about. Lastly, we have our passive funds. So passive funds in comparison to active and asset allocation funds only need 3 years of data in order to score. The main reason for this is that we're no longer looking for outperformance. Instead, an ideal passive manager is going to provide very consistent style purity. It's going to provide tight benchmark tracking and a low cost, right? Because we're no longer paying for that active manager fee. Similar to active funds, we're back to our industry standard benchmarks. Same as before, we're looking at the Russell, MSCI, Bloomberg, Barclays, and others. And again, if you pull an asset class review, you can see those secondary and tertiary benchmarks. And like before with the active funds, we're looking at custom peer groups. So in this case, they would omit active funds. We're only going to compare passive funds to other passive funds. This is the passive scorecard, so still out of 10 points, and the first 80% is still looking at quantitative, but now instead of those 3 categories, we're looking at 2, namely style and tracking factors and peer group rankings. Style analysis and style drift are similar to our active funds. Now we're taking into consideration a tracking error, though. This is giving us a tighter tracking for style purity. Same for our peer group rankings. We see that there's now 4 categories for peer group rankings versus 2 previously. And this is, again, going to help us ensure that the fund is performing well against its peers. And we have our same qualitative factors as before with manager tenure, expense, and our strength statistics. What are some advantages of the scorecard? Well, we have quite a few, and I've tried to list them all out here, but I'm sure I've missed some. The scorecard system is a great way to identify successful managers, not only in the short term, but especially over the long term, as we're looking at that 5-year data for active and asset allocation funds and 3 years of data for passive strategies. We're also looking to integrate this into our IPS. This is a really easy integration with the acceptable watch list and review bands, and our ability to use custom benchmarks and returns-based style analysis provides a clear and accurate picture of the fund's performance to its relevant benchmarks and peers. And lastly, how do we pull these additional reports that I keep bringing up? The asset class review can be pulled a few ways, and if we have time, I'll show you how to do that. One way is from the fund lookup tool, where in that short bar where it says fund lookup, you click on it, type in the ticker, select the fund, select reports, and you can choose the asset class review. And you can compare up to 4 funds in the same asset class all side by side. The asset class review is about 13 pages per fund, and it gives you a visual depiction for each of the scorecard metrics. So you can see how this fund is stacking up in comparison to its benchmarks. The asset class review also gives a clearer breakdown of those custom style benchmarks that you see in your asset allocation strategies. And this module is also available in the investment review. You can add this in step 3 of your report builder. I will say, again, it is 13 pages or so per fund, and it takes about a minute to generate per fund. So if you select your whole lineup for your asset class review in your investment review, it will take probably 30 to 45 minutes to generate, and it will be a couple hundred pages. I think the asset class review is a fantastic report if you're looking to remove a fund or add a new fund and really dive into what that fund is doing, how it's performing, how it can benefit the portfolio or not. One way to get through the asset class review or to figure out how to read it is by downloading the Scorecard System Overview PowerPoint. This is also available in the Resource Center, and again, if you just type in Scorecard in that search bar under your name, it's really easy to find. This PowerPoint walks you through an asset class review for each of the strategies and points out how these metrics come into play and what the graphs mean. Another report that I mentioned that I think is particularly helpful is Score History. Score History allows us to see why a high-scoring fund might still be flagged for watchlist or review. We can see when the score dropped, we can see how long it's been since it's dropped or how long it was lower, and how it is to recovering that and moving its way to acceptable. Always welcome to reach out to us at support@rpag.com. You can also give us a call, and I'm sure, as you know, there's plenty of ways to get in contact us through the portal itself, whether it's that contact us button at the bottom or the Ask RPAG.